The Silverstone Grand Prix was the most exciting racing we've seen this season, but while that was all going on, there was a new technical directive that dropped. The FIA thinks some teams may have been bending the rules, and what they've been doing has left Toto Wolff shocked. I'm not going to give you any points for guessing who the suspected rule breakers are. I'm sure you can guess it first time. Let's get you filled in on what's going on and what the consequences of the FIA's rule clampdown might be. The technical directive in question is actually the one that related to the new porpoising tests that we reported on around the Montreal Grand Prix. Before we talk about the rule breaking that the technical directive is addressing, let's get you up to date on the new porpoising tests quickly. The directive, which debuted in Montreal, was greeted with a huge amount of resistance from everyone apart from Mercedes. It was aimed at helping to create an aerodynamic oscillation metric, or AOM, which would allow the FIA to monitor the amount of porpoising. The exact details of the AOM are still not released and could change before the French Grand Prix on the 28th of July when these measures are meant to come into place. At the moment, it is assumed that the vertical forces of 10 G achieved by Mercedes in Baku are above the limit that the regulators have in mind. Instead of a simple acceleration value, however, the AOM will be far more complicated. The FIA came up with a formula designed to calculate aerodynamically generated vertical oscillations. The AOM value is given in joules per kilogram per 100 kilometers. From how the AOM value is generated, we can assume that the FIA is more interested in limiting the amount of energy that's being put through the driver's spines than the strength of the force. We don't know how they've come to this measure, but it was agreed on with the teams at the Technical Advisory Committee before the British Grand Prix, so it seems the teams are on board. They also realised that running the car as close to the ground as possible meant you could get the most out of the ground effect concept. I'm sure you've heard Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton saying that they just need to get their car close enough to the ground to unlock its true potential. These two things together create a problem though. When your car is low to the ground and very stiff, the main plank will hit the track surface, and when it does, it won't have much flexibility to absorb this effect. The FIA didn't want teams to have flexible floors to absorb these impacts though, as there are safety risks that come with that. So what they did with the rules was limit the amount of flexion in the floor. These rules, specifically Article 3.8 of the technical regulations, dictate that all components influencing a car's aerodynamic performance, which the floor does in the new formula of cars, must be rigidly secured to the entirely sprung part of the car and remain immobile in relation to the sprung part of the car. In other words, movable or flexible aerodynamic devices are not allowed, save for the DRS, because in theory they can offer a performance gain. However, the FIA reserves the right to introduce further load or deflection tests on any part of the bodywork, which appears to be, or is suspected of, moving whilst the car is in motion. To ensure the teams weren't making flexible aero parts, the FIA put some tests in place. The current regulations say that a maximum deflection of 2mm at the two middle plank holes and no more than 2mm at its rearmost hole is acceptable, ensuring that the floor is stiff enough. What these tests don't do though is test the flexion underneath where the driver sits, or in a larger area of the floor. One way that the teams might be getting around this test is to mount their floor in such a way that where the test is being done, the floor doesn't have a maximum deflection greater than 2mm, but elsewhere it does. The new rules will address this loophole, and the 2mm tolerance will be rigorously enforced, and the stiffness around the floor hole must now be uniform for a radial distance of 15mm outside the periphery, with a variance not exceeding 10% either way. The FIA added, competitors will be required to demonstrate compliance with these provisions by the way of detailed inspection of both the CAD and the physical installation, as well as the finite element analysis. If you remember last season, Toto Wolff and Christian Horner started a bit of a battle over flexible aero parts. While it was wings last season, it's going to be floors this season. And apparently it was Toto Wolff who threw the first stone this year. Reports are saying that he's the one who told the FIA that teams might be trying this, not that you could tell from his statement on the new technical directive. I believe that some teams have been stretching that maybe too much, and that's going to change before Paul Ricard, said Toto Wolff. He did say that the FIA's clarification came as a surprise, as he believed the regulations regarding floors had been unambiguous. Nobody had an idea until the FIA brought it up in the last Technical Advisory Committee, which was a great surprise of all the teams, because what's in the regulation and what's the intent of the regulations is pretty clear, he said. I mean, there is no argument why that could deflect more than what's in the regs. So it's a bit of a surprise to say the least, more of a shocker. Mercedes were recently accused by other teams of acting up over the severity of the porpoising problem in an attempt to get the FIA to change the technical regulations. In our opinion, this might be a bit more play acting from Wolff to try and take attention away from himself. From what we're hearing, it is Red Bull and Ferrari who are the guilty parties this time. They have apparently found a way to get some flexibility into their floors underneath where the drivers sit, which means their cars are much more capable of dealing with porpoising and are better at avoiding the phenomenon altogether. Ferrari have been bouncing pretty badly this season, but unlike Mercedes, their car has been dealing with it very well. Maybe this is because their floors have been able to absorb the impacts better than others. Mercedes had what was arguably their most competitive race of the season in Silverstone. It wasn't their highest scoring because of George Russell's retirement on lap 1 of the race, but they definitely appeared to be on pace to compete with the front two teams again. Mercedes was the third fastest constructor according to the Super Times, and it was only 0.092 seconds slower than Ferrari. Only Carlos Sainz's average of the top 10 laps was faster than that of Hamilton. If the rumours are true and Ferrari and Red Bull have been utilising this loophole, then they will have to make setup changes before the race at Paul Ricard. One option could be to redesign the floor to remove any flexion, but that's going to be expensive and time consuming. The quicker and cheaper fix would be to introduce reinforcements to the floor inside the car in the form of ribs. This option will probably involve adding more weight than a whole new floor though. Whatever the offending teams do, their cars are going to get heavier, and they may need to raise their ride height, which means lost lap time on track. Mercedes trackside engineer Andrew Shovlin said that if the leading two teams will have to change their plank setup in a few weeks, the silver arrows may be brought back into play. When it came to light, we realised there are opportunities that we've perhaps not been taking or exploiting, he added. So it won't affect us in how we run our car. It may well be it affects our competitors, and by virtue of that, we move a little bit closer. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that teams are finding loopholes in the technical regulations. Honestly, the whole point of the sport is to try and exploit the rules to your advantage. If it really is Red Bull and Ferrari who've been doing so, then the outlook for this season is extremely exciting. Silverstone showed that Mercedes are going in the right direction with their car development, and if Ferrari and Red Bull are going to lose lap time in France, then we might see a 3-constructor battle for the rest of the season. Do you think Mercedes could have a chance at getting back into the title race this season? Or is this going to be too little too late for them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye bye.